Good day, ma'am. Good day, classmates. We are the group 4, and in this video, we will going to present to you our report through this video presentation entitled A Glance at Selected Philippine Political Caricature in Alfred McCoy's Philippine Cartoons. Political Caricature of the American Era, 1900s to 1941.
We are about to give an important highlights on the background of the author as well as the importance of relevance of Philippine caricature and cartoons in our history. When we say political cartoons and caricature, these are rather recent art form which veered away from the classical art by exaggerating human features of poking fun and its subjects. So we can see a caricature or cartoons that exaggerating human faces. These are used as a symbol enabled for the creator to project certain ideas and commentaries based on the social political issues in a certain period of a certain time. And also these are such as art genre and techniques become a part of a print media as form of social and political commentary, which usually targets persons of power and authority. So those who are one that is subject to this political cartoon is caricature, because cartoon became an effective tool of publicizing opinions through heavy use of symbolisms, which is different form of verbose written, editorial, and common opinion pieces. In addition, political cartoon and caricature is a unique way because it projects or represents opinions and captures the audience's imagination. Is a reason enough for the history to examine these political cartoons, and also it commemorates in mass media in better this shape public opinion, and such kind of opinion is worthy of historical examination. Since it was a public opinion or commentary, I think that's solely a part of our culture and traditions, so that is why precisely that the reason why it is more worthy of historical analysis and examination.
Alfred McCoy is an American professor of history and award-winning writer who dedicated his professor career in the research of Southeast Asian history, especially that the Philippines, as well as the study of U.S. foreign policy. His interest in Filipino history allowed him to master the Hiligaynon dialect and understand the political situation, not just the region of Iloilo, but in the whole country. With the help of Alfredo Rosas, the designer of the book, McCoy published Philippine Caricature.
Political cartoons and caricature are a rather recent art form, which veered away from the classical art by exaggerating human features and poking fun at its subject. Such art genre and technique became a part of the print media as a form of social and political commentary, which usually targets persons of power and authority. Cartoons became an effective tool of publicizing opinions through heavy use of symbolism, which is different from a verbose written editorial and opinion pieces. The unique way that a caricature presents opinion and captures the audience's imagination is a reason enough for historians to examine these political cartoons. Commentaries in mass media inevitably shape public opinion, and such kind of opinion is worthy of historical examination. In his book, Philippine Cartoons, Political Caricature of the American Era, 1900s to 1941, Alfred McCoy, together with Alfredo Rosas, compiled political cartoons published in newspaper dailies and periodicals in the aforementioned time period. For this, we are going to look at selected cartoons and explain the context of each one. The first example was published in the Independent on May 20, 1916. The cartoon shows a politician from a Tondo named Dr. Santos passing his crown to his brother-in-law, Dr. Barcelona. A Filipino guy, as depicted wearing salakot and barong Tagalog, was trying to stop Santos, telling the latter to stop giving Barcelona the crown because it is not his to begin with. The second example was also published by the Independent on 16 June 1917. This was drawn by Fernando Amarsolo and was aimed as a commentary to the workings of Manila police at that period. Here, we see a Filipino child who stole a skinny chicken because he had nothing to eat. The police officer was relentlessly pursuing the said child. A man wearing a salakot labeled Juan de la Cruz was grabbing the officer, telling him to leave the small-time pickpockets and thieves and to turn at the great thieves instead. He was pointing to the huge warehouse containing bulks of rice, milk, and grocery products. The third cartoon was a commentary on the unprecedented cases of colorum automobiles in the city of streets. The Philippine Free Press published this commentary when fatal accidents involving colorum vehicles and taxis occurred too often already. The fourth cartoon depicts a cinema. A blown-up police officer was at the screen saying that couples are not allowed to neck and make love in the theater. Two youngsters looked horrified while an older couple seemed amused. The next cartoon was published by the Independent on 27 November 1915. Here, we see the caricature of Uncle Sam riding a chariot pulled by Filipinos wearing school uniform. The Filipino boys were carrying American objects like baseball bats, whiskey, and boxing gloves. McCoy, in his caption to the said cartoon, says that this cartoon was based on an event in 1907 when William Howard Taft was brought to the Manila Pier riding a chariot pulled by students of Liceo de Manila. Such was condemned by the nationalists at that time. The last cartoon was published by Lipang Calabao on 24 August 1907. In the picture, we can see Uncle Sam rationing porridge to the politicians and members of the Progresista Party, sometimes known as Federalista Party, while members of the Nacionalista Party look on and wait for their turn. This cartoon depicts the patronage of the United States being converted by politicians from either of the party.
Analysis of the political caricatures during American period. The transition from Spanish colonial period to American occupation period, it demonstrated a lot of changes and shifts in culture, society, and politics. Since the Americans already took place, then it gave many influences to the Filipinos. And these influences, it results the changes from the cultures and societies and the politics of the Philippines. During American period, the Americans introduced Filipinos the different manifestations of modernity, like healthcare, transportations, and media. The post-independence and post-Filipino-American period in the Philippines were experienced by different Filipino, and most of these Filipino came from different class. The upper Principalia class experienced economic prosperity with the opening up of the Philippine economy to United States. But the majority of poor Filipino remained poor, desperate, and victims of repression, which means that the well life only experienced by Filipino who came from the higher class, but the poor Filipino remained poor. The selected cartoon illustrate patronage became influential and powerful, not only between clients and patrons, but also between the newly formed parties which composed by the elites and the United States. This depicted in the cartoon where United States represented by Uncle Sam provided doleouts for members of Federalista while Nacionalista politicians waited for their turn. Thus, this essence of competing political parties to enforce choices among voters was cancelled out. This is because the politicians kept on transferring from one party to another depending on which party is more stronger and more powerful in the specific period of time. It is also depicted in the cartoons the transition of Catholic-centered Spanish-Filipino society to an imperial American, a simulated one, and its complications. One example is the uncontrollable increase of motorized vehicles in the city. Automobiles became popular in the mode of transportation. It leads to the emergence of taxis. Due to its popularity in the mode of transportation, the people creates different kinds of taxis in the city. The laws and policy implementation was not followed by the people. This leads to the increasing of colorum and the unlicensed vehicles that is driving around the city. The rules governing the insurance of licensed drivers was loose, and this is the direct consequence of the urbanization of the Philippines. Another example is what McCoy called the sexual revolution that occurred in the 1930s. McCoy called it the sexual revolution. It's because the young people already forgot how to be conservative. The young people already engaging sexual activities in the public places. Example is in the cinemas. Lastly, cartoons also illustrated the conditions of poor Filipinos in the Philippines that is governed by the United States. A cartoon depicted how police authority oppressed petty Filipino criminals while turning a blind eye on hoarders who monopolize goods in their warehouse. According to this cartoon, the police authorities doesn't really care if the place is already full of criminals or the place is already in its chaotic stage. Another cartoon depicts how Americans control Filipinos through seemingly harmless, by controlling their consciousness and mentality. Americans got control and subjugate Filipinos. According to this cartoon, the Americans took advantage of Filipinos by showing that they are heroes, they are trying to help, and they are harmless. But the truth is, they want to control the Philippines, the Filipinos, to be under its power. And they became successful.
The transition from Catholic-centered Spanish-Filipino society to an Empire-American simulated one and its complications were depicted in the cartoons. So there was a struggle of shifting of culture. So from Catholic-centered, meaning prior to the American occupations in the country, Filipinos are known to be conservative, but due to the American culture that has been introduced to our country. So the liberal ideas that has coming in is somehow different to conservative way that we were into. So that is why there is a complication of transition between a Catholic-centered Spanish-Filipino culture to American empire occupation in the Philippines. And lastly, the cartoons are also illustrated the conditions of poor Filipinos in the Philippines, now burned by the United States. From the looks of it, nothing much has changed. So although there is a change of colonizers from the Spaniards to Americans, we could also see from the different cartoons and caricature that their main concept in producing such as cartoons and caricature was for them to be able to relay or convey the message that of the conditions of the poor Filipinos in the Philippines. Sometimes it was being neglected by the colonizers, but since these cartoons, this caricature has been an outlet and able for them to have a public commentary on different aspects of society, they were able to see or they will able to relay and convey message that conditions of the Filipinos, most officially those poor Filipinos, was given highlights through these cartoons and caricatures.
In conclusion, we could say that each individual caricature recorded national attitudes toward the coming of the Americas as well as the changing of time, and also clarify historical information and serve as an eye-opener of the realities that has been experienced by the people under the American occupation. In addition, the book reflects anti-American sentiments in conditions through condemnations of the ruling class, which gave us a glimpse of Philippine society. During the American era, it visual the historical politics and appreciate the representation of perceptions of the Filipinos during the era.